This is a producer testimonial video focused on the farmer's experience with installing and using solar-powered water pumping systems for his livestock on rented ground.
Well, I'm Logan Grant, and we're on a farm here behind Brownsburg off of Dutch Hollow Road. It's a rental farm, and we run cattle and sheep back here. I wanted to do rotational grazing and to graze the whole farm and the whole property. And in order to do that, I had to get, like I say, fence and water over to, the other side of the farm, because it's about a 103 acre farm with a 50-50 split, give or take, about 50 acres and 52 acres. And so, like I said, we installed water and fence, and I don't make any kind of hay or any kind of crops here. We used to over in this backfield, but now it's just a rotation plan from the other side of the road to this field, across the road, and back across the road. So the only water source we have is the creek, which is Branch Creek is the name of it. And it runs on, across the road, straight through, never runs under the road. And there's a few springs up from it in the back. And that's pretty much the only water we have. As far as this side, there is no water on the farm. Some of the challenges on this side of the road, being no water, is you're limited to how much, how many numbers you can run and how much livestock you could really put on the farm. And so in order to keep the numbers that I already had, it wasn't even a matter of wanting to add more. I just had too much stock on one side of the farm. And so, in order to run more numbers, I had to have water over here so that I could access, the total property and not just half of it. Well, some of the different options that I looked at, the original, I thought about maybe drilling a well, but I rent this farm, it's not owned. And so it didn't really seem feasible to me as a tenant, not a landowner, to drill a well. And of course I didn't even have permission to do that to begin with. And so I looked at maybe, different options as coming across the road to the water source, or from the water source that was already here. And that pretty much led me to the solar water system. Being as there's no current out here and there's no water over here to pump from, we come from across the road with the solar system. The first solar water pump that was on this farm was from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and it was a completely portable system with black rollout pipe. And it's a little bit different than what we have here now. The panel was set right with the reservoir tanks on a trailer that was portable. That no lines were buried, and it worked great. We just went over to the creek and set the pump in the creek and temporarily ran our water pipe through the culvert. So we'd go from one pasture to the next, just pulling the trailer when we moved the cattle. And so I learned a lot about it at that point, learned a lot about solar and how it all works and some of the limitations of it and some of the benefits of it. It basically starts at your water source. We come to the widest and deepest part of our creek, which worked out good because it was also the shortest run, and we set a pump there, and it pumps from there up a fence line directly across the road. But before we cross the road, we set our solar panel and all of our electronics, which feeds power right back to the pump. So the pump pushes water up, and it cuts out of a branch. We have like a water line with two branches coming off feeding two tanks. One branches off and comes directly into a catch pen area in a small 300-gallon oval tank. Then the water runs across the road and up, branches into another stock tank, and then comes to these reservoir tanks where it's holding approximately 2,200 gallons, I would say. And from here, it feeds off back behind us into the last and final branch and final stock tank. But when any tank is drained, or any stock drinks out of any tank, the reservoirs directly start filling that tank because water flows, to the point where the lowest point. And so it's all being held here, feeding the three stock tanks. Well, the process of coming under the road could be a very confusing one. You get a lot of different answers. Talking to VDOT, you need to talk to the right people that deal with, right-of-ways under state roads and routes and everything like that. And so the process of that is you need to get a bond, which just ensures that, you know, the road won't be tore up basically, and it'll be put back like it was. And you have to get a permit, which is basically just a right-of-way through for VDOT, you know, to go under their road. And they make you try and bore under the road. You have to have 3 failed attempts going under the road before they'll let you open cut the road. And actually here on this project, we got through the first pass. It was no problem. And so basically the permit and the bond was all you needed. And after the work is done, the bond's released. Some of the biggest hassles is really just little things. Like when we first put it in, like I said, this is year 2 of me having solar on the farm. And I think it's just intimidating seeing all the electronics and the panel itself, and you think of the pump and the creek, but all that has been, you know, hands off. It's worked perfect. I haven't had a single issue. It's like, say, smaller things like your float, you know, it could get stuck. I've had it get stuck and the tank overflows, and just smaller little things like that, really. I would say that, and one time it did happen that a sensor got a little bit of buildup on it. I don't know if it was algae or what it was, but it didn't cut the water off, and the reservoirs just got a little bit too full. But I mean, it's hard for me to knock this system, and it just hasn't been too many issues really to speak of. Like I said, before I had it, I was raising all of my stock on like 50% of the farm. And so now that I'm able to utilize my whole farm, I've noticed, you know, higher weaning weights and better condition of my cattle. And so it seems like it's, you know, there's a benefit there. It costs money. It's an investment to do this. It's a low cost investment, if you ask me. It's not terribly expensive. It's a little bit of labor and money to put it in. But if it can get your cattle on more grazing ground, it's good for the farm. I've noticed it's you know, good for my pastures to let them rest and recuperate, and also the condition of my cattle, of doing the rotation and being in more grass throughout a longer period of the year, which has also cut down on my hay feeding tremendously. So it saves me money. Like even here in year 2, I've noticed the savings just in the amount that I was feeding versus now. Like I said, with this system, you know, the good thing about it is it's pretty much your system and there's no strings attached to it. You literally just drop your pump in your water source and set your tank where you want it. Versus, you know, if you want a water source at some point through like the NRCS, if you're thinking about that, you know, there's kind of rules and regulations, and it's just a cost share to doing that. And again, if you're a tenant, if you're renting your farm, it could be difficult because you can't make that call. The landowner, who may not be a farmer, has to make that decision. And if they say, hey, you know, I don't want to fence my creek off and plant trees and have a buffer area, it just doesn't fit on this farm, you know, this might be a better fit. Some words of wisdom I would give if somebody found themselves in a position such as I was in is look at your situation. It's like, you know, if you own your land, and you know it's free and clear, it's your land, you're not a land renter, and you're farming your own land, you could consider a more permanent source like a well, or you know, accessing your creek at some point or something like that. But if you're a land, you know, if you're renting land and you know you're renting land for cattle or whatever it may be, I would look into, like I said, the solar water system, because you know if for some reason your rent runs out, or you know it doesn't get leased back to you, the system goes with you if it's on a trailer or a portable wagon of some sort. And so they always say, you know, the farmer makes the land a farm. The land just isn't a farm. And so if you lose your lease, your cattle go, your water goes, you know, you don't lose it there on the farm as a fixture.